you're going to learn. It will grow, but you got to start working with it. One of them was to approach this, and I've used in the past a couple of phrases just to get people attention, but the concept of a reusable TLAM, where we don't expect everything to come back, but you're going to get a certain percentage back, and you can reuse those, and that's okay because we've made it an affordable enough platform that it's not so expensive and exquisite that if you lose one, you are now at an operational risk of being able to accomplish your mission. And I've often said that it'd be great if we had the ability to have, for you science fiction fans, affordable unmanned aerial systems using this concept of a reusable TLAM that are stacked up in the hangar deck like a bunch of Cylon Raiders were from Battlestar Galactica. How much of a fight is there? Because it's clear y'all have had this discussion with people. Going towards a more basic, affordable platform that you have a higher level of attrition versus the people that want the one-stop shopping, exquisite Cadillac.
Start that off. I think, again, coming back to the Air Force, but, working with DARPA and others, the Air Force Research Lab has spent quite a bit of time in this, and there's some developments that have changed what's possible. And so when you look at the Cirrus jet and you look at some of these smaller private jets that are available now based on like the Williams FJ motor, if you can take something like that already has high reliability and certification built in, and then now you build a platform around that, then you get a totally different investment opportunity as opposed to many of the challenges that we've had with unmanned systems over the years. Without fail, almost you can look at these specific systems, and in test and development, in early test and development, and exploration of these capabilities, oftentimes there's serious catastrophic failures, and it's typically something that is preventable, but it hasn't gone through the same level of engineering as a manned aviation capability. So there's lots of opportunity then to explore that space and get into lower costs, because you're capitalizing on what is already in production instead of trying to create a new production line that in just experimental, and hoping that it's scalable and that you're not going to discover things along the way that are going to really eat your lunch. The TURN program with DARPA is an example of that, and it didn't really make it very far because of that. Just one thing on the AI I want to hit on, then I'll turn over for anybody else having comments on that, is something that really opened my eyes a few years ago was some work by some of the folks at the Navy Research Lab at NRL. And they published an article, a team of folks, and they were talking about goal reasoning agents. And so what I find interesting about this discussion is that the alpha dogfight started, and on purpose, because I think a lot of it's about building trust, about basic fighter maneuvers. So what do you do with a brand new lieutenant or ensign in a squadron? Well, you have to teach them basic fighter maneuvers before you can get into advanced tactics and weapons employment. And so that's what that goal was. That assumes that we'll have those kind of engagements in the first place, that we'll be able to close that gap, and that we need to have those kind of engagements. Whereas this other study that I'm highlighting was a goal reasoning agent based on beyond visual range engagements. And a goal reasoning agent that was able to take in the different areas that would normally be scripted, if you wanted to make a scripted agent, the goal reasoning agent outperformed by 3,200%. And so when you put that in terms of kill ratios, that is mind-blowing. And we link that in the article as just a research point to demonstrate how disruption can really happen, but we're not prepared to have those kind of conversations yet. So back to that trust discussion, it's really important that we dig deeper into these kind of if you can have a tridable and if you can extend range, it's not about extending a human's range with a tanker necessarily, although that might be value added in specific circumstances. But what else can we do that is, putting the machine at risk further out in front? So I'll stop there.
Well, I'm glad you talked about it, because one of my notes was, how many times are we going to have air-to-air combat in the old school way? And I guess beginning with the F-14 and the missile system it had, it was beyond visual range. I mean, the TV camera, that thing could see further than human eyes. So, and with radar and all that stuff. But I am constantly reminded of Dash. You talked about the drone anti-submarine helicopter that I put up on the web page, inviting people to join us. That system died, and it died because it was paid for by NavAir, but it was owned by the Surface Force. In other words, it had no real owner, and it had problems. It was test tube, not test tube. The old tube stuff. It wasn't solid state equipment. It still worked. They could use it for a variety of things, but instead of continuing to improve it, it got killed because, and the argument was that it was losing too many aircraft and all that. But a lot of those problems could have been improved and could have been kept. And instead of continuing that, we put manned helicopters on board ships doing basically the same mission plus some other ones. This is the constant fight, I think, if you introduce new technology, is that and I think you've discussed it's going to go wrong at first. There are going to be mistakes. There are going to be errors. You cannot walk away from a program because it's got that. And I gather that is, we in the Navy, and I'm probably sure in the Air Force, this zero defects mentality, it prevents sometimes experimentation that should be encouraged. Is that kind of what you see with your view going forward, or how these systems could be introduced and should be introduced? Bring some out, let them play with them, and we'll see where they break and see what the users say they could use them for.
I, for one, second that and believe yes. I think there's a lot of opportunity in bringing industry into these too, going back to that basic premise that a lot of this is software driven. The Air Force, I saw an article just recently about Golden Horde and setting up a software factory for that. That's exactly the kind of ideas, because some of this can be done in modeling sim, and that's where these digital programs and digital twinning you can earn trust and kind of work your way through that and think concepts in modeling and simming too. I mean, NVIDIA's got an amazing, that if you look at Omniverse as a digital twinning environment, that's an example of something in DoD that we probably should have and allow operators to interface and work through these kind of ideas, because the best ideas are probably not going to come from us old folk. But over to Mrs. or Kramer, if you got anything on that.
Actually, I think Mrs. may have dropped the call there, but some actually probably would say that in terms of the traditional DoD acquisition strategy of evolutionary incremental acquisition, that the MQ-25 right now, as it will be fielded, is an air refueling platform, is a good introduction to gaining some of that trust. I think what we counter in the paper with, though, is this is a time when, based on the fielding of capabilities by the adversary and the operational environments we're placed in, maybe that incremental evolutionary approach to acquisition, we needed to do some type of a leapfrog and provide more capability than maybe some folks would be comfortable with, but that we know that would provide us that ability to counter those capabilities provided by the adversary. And in doing so, the trust would be gained. Necessarily, we wouldn't be relying on those platforms for the manned platform survivability, but it would be complementing our employment or extending our range of their own employment of weapon systems. But our worry is that we are not going at a pace that is quick enough to counter those capabilities based on the regions that we are being asked to operate in, or the capabilities we're asked to hold at risk.
Well, and with that, Kramer, another part of this discussion, which required a fair amount of research, is really looking at where we putting our money and how long does it take to get to a certified platform, particularly when you start, integrating weapons. That is a very slow process, particularly when you go back to that 10 to the minus 9 discussion and working through initial operational test and evaluation and follow-on test and evaluation. And just do a quick Google search on those things and programs like MQ-8C Fighter Scout or the RT-21 Blackjack or Triton MQ-8C. MQ-4C. You pick any of those programs and you'll find that, particularly with unmanned systems, there's a lot of unknowns that start popping up over time as you go through these deliberate test events. And if MQ-25 follows that same path, it will be many, many years before we even talk about integrating advanced sensors and weapons for a platform like that, because we still have some major milestones to get through for that program.
Let's play alternative universe here as we get near the end of the show. When you read a lot of the people, including myself, who will write about some of the limitations they see on unmanned systems, people bring up issues of coding, software development, communication links, JAG, legal issues, our senior leader understanding of the technology and all of the above. And as people look at the challenge on the other side of the Pacific, I'm sure everybody here has heard about, the Davidson window of the threat of China. So let's say the good idea fairy gave me the capability to do a few things for you. One, I've got tens of billions of dollars I can tap into over the course of the next 5 fiscal years. And I have the ability to tap a few people on the shoulder and remove some bureaucratic hurdles for you. So you've got money. You've got enough top cover to go around some of your peacetime bureaucratic frustrations. Where would you invest effort and money to have something that would be of use to the fleet and projection power ashore that optimistically could be FOC by fiscal year 26-27?
All right, I'll start that one off. So back to the people, I think that's a really important start point. There are really smart people that have done their homework within the force, but their timing within the force, career timing or location just doesn't allow them to, we can't harness that energy and that experience. So I would, if what you're saying, if that was the preconditions and we had an opportunity, that'd be the first thing I would do, is put together the right team. Part of that team is the operational experience, but part of that team is understanding how to navigate, I'll say, innovation within the bureaucracy, hacking the bureaucracy, because there are opportunities, but they're very difficult. It's very easy to run into no's as you work through there, no matter how much top cover you have, unless that top cover includes, congressional representation and specific leaders with the power to say yes within your service. And that's both on the service secretary side and on the military chief side. And so that's how I would approach it, is put together, that kind of Amazon style 1-2 pizza team that can complement all of those different aspects, and then deliberately get after experimentation, integrated experimentation, and find where we can complement, where's the lowest risk, highest payoff complement, or where's the most disruptive complement to our current operations? What would really force us to think differently if all of a sudden we had this new capability? I like to go back to one example of an urgent need statement for Space Marines that went back, I believe it was early 2000s. And, it sounded funny at the time. Could we be that far from something like that today? Probably a lot closer than we were 20 years ago. But over to Kramer.
I mean, I'm going to be